$465 billion. That's how much richer Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the world's richest men got in the last 4 years, according to a new report from the UK-based charity organization Oxfam. That amounts to $14 million per hour. Oxfam says, on the other hand, nearly 5 billion people are poorer than they were 4 years ago.
Of all the reasons we've listed for the American empire's decline, it could be argued that the thing underlining them all is pervasive income inequality. While U.S. citizens have long reported feeling disillusioned with the ever-growing gap between rich and poor, the frustration is seemingly coming to a head in 2025.
According to a Gallup survey, 40% of upper-income households say price increases are causing financial hardship. Compare that to 74% of low-income households. When it comes to closing the gap, many Americans are on board for change. Polling from Pew Research revealing 66% of Americans who believe there is too much economic inequality think the federal government should step in to help.
In fact, the economy was once perhaps the most pressing issue of the 2024 election and a key factor in President Trump's re-election. The uneven distribution of wealth has left Americans feeling increasingly hopeless about their country's future, a sign that the U.S.'s grip on being the only world superpower may be slipping.
To bring our analysis to this point, I have produced a 6-part video series on the US-China trade war. Please see links below. These videos have exhaustively examined the subjective and objective factors driving the US government's actions from every angle. Should any undisclosed factors remain, I deem them either insignificant or too delicate to state explicitly, requiring you to read between my lines, even decipher meanings from my guarded utterance, so we may preserve this dialogue. Now, let's dive into the main topic. Athens' Megarian Decree 432 BC barred Megarian ships from Aegean ports to cripple Sparta's alliance economy, igniting the Peloponnesian War. Yet it backfired catastrophically. Megara's collapse drove it into Sparta's arms, and Athens ultimately fell to its rival. The war ravaged Greece. 1 out of every 4 adult males perished. Farmlands lay abandoned, and trade networks disintegrated. In a tragic irony, Macedonians seized the opportunity. Philip II conquered Greece by 338 BC. Rome's stranglehold on Carthage, 3rd century BC, by monopolizing western Mediterranean grain routes. Rome aimed to suffocate its rivals' war capacity. After 3 Punic Wars, Carthage was annihilated, but victory followed Rome. In 2 respects. First is the economic ruin. 6 emergency war taxes destroyed the smallholder farming backbone. Next is the institutional corruption. Warlord politics emerged. Post-war recovery relied on Carthaginian-style plantation slavery. Then there is a paradox of victory. Inheriting Carthage's commercial mantle, Rome succumbed to the same trade atrophy it had vanquished. Arnold Toynbee's warning: civilizations targeting competitors for destruction rather than assimilation inevitably lose their innovative DNA. Rome's fall to barbarians echoes Athens' fate. Logical, yet poetically just. The trade wars during the era of imperial hegemony primarily employed price manipulation to achieve colonial monopolies. Examples across centuries are: 16th century Spain enforced a silver embargo in the Americas to exclude Dutch merchants from colonial trade. 17th century Netherlands weaponized the Navigation Acts against the British transit trade by seizing English merchant vessels and imposing exorbitant transit duties. 18th century Britain enacted the Navigation Acts to blockade North American colonies, mandating colonial raw materials be sold exclusively to Britain. Then again, 19th century Britain launched the Opium Wars to dismantle China-Qing dynasty's trade barriers, forcibly imposing free trade through military aggression. The focus of trade conflicts shifted only after the Industrial Revolution from raw resource competition to controlling market access rights. Entering into the 20th century, the sudden rise of the United States has made it a historic representative of Western trade warfare in a new era. It not only inherited the entrenched mindset of past trade wars, but also updated modern trade war tactics in step with the times, expanding the geographic scope of such conflicts. This evolution is evident across three key dimensions. First, weaponization of technology. In 2018, the US launched a technological war against China, imposing chip export bans and pressuring SML to cut off lithography machine supplies to China, directly targeting China's ability to upgrade its industrial capacities. This can be compared to the Netherlands ban in the 17th century on exporting shipbuilding technology to Britain. Number two, financial sanctions network. During the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022, the US removed Russian banks from SWIFT and froze its foreign exchange reserves, causing the ruble to plummet by 30% in a single day. This is analogous to Napoleon's continental blockade in 1806, which sought to sever Britain's financial settlement channels across Europe. Number three, contest for rule-making power. The US embedded institutionalized poison pill clauses in agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, setting up systemic barriers that restrict member states from signing free trade agreements, that is FTA, with so-called non-market economies, a clear reference to China. A historic parallel is Britain's forced promotion of the gold standard in the 19th century, which effectively deprived other nations of their monetary sovereignty. However, human survival follows its own natural laws, and economic principles are merely a subsystem of these fundamental rules. The United States' aforementioned actions go against the natural laws of human development, so it is only natural they have backfired. For example, the direct consequences of the US-led technological confrontation with China has been to force China to increase its investment in basic scientific research. In the long run, this has accelerated China's self-reliance in technology, enabling it to replace US technologies and break through key technical bottlenecks, thereby forming a more complete innovation chain, a development that is now technically undermining the United States. Another example is the so-called financial nuclear bomb unleashed on Russia during the Ukraine conflict. Rather than collapsing the Russian economy, these sanctions pushed Russia to exit the SWIFT system and, based on its abundant natural resources, establish a more independent economic sovereignty. During the same period, Russia's economic growth rate significantly outperformed that of America's major European allies. As for the so-called poison pill clauses, they have not achieved the desired effect envisioned by the United States. According to data from the Peterson Institute, after the USMCA took effect, the number of new China-related FTAs signed in North America dropped to zero between 2019 and 2023. However, in 2023, Mexico's imports from China surged by 35%, particularly in sectors such as automotive parts and photovoltaic components. Within the CPTPP, Vietnam still remains heavily dependent on Chinese supplies. China-Vietnam trade volume reached $230 billion in 2023, while Malaysia has opted to rectify RCEP to offset the constraints imposed by the CPTPP and reduce its compliance costs. The UK pledged to honor the spirit of the poison pill when it joined the CPTPP in 2023, but has clearly rejected decoupling from China. Although the China-EU Comprehensive Agreement on Investment (CAI) remains frozen, the German chemical giant BASF continues to advance its 10 billion euros integrated chemical complex in Zhejiang, China. Similarly, among the member countries, Japan's Toyota BYD joint venture electrical vehicle BZ3 uses BYD's blade battery, signaling deep technological integration between China and Japan. This kind of industrial interdependence significantly weakens the willingness of those countries to decouple from China. History offers sobering lessons. 17th century, Britain's Navigation Acts failed to dismantle Dutch trade networks. Ming-Qing China's maritime bans break technological obsolescence. Zheng He's fleet superiority vanished under isolation, paving the way for Western canon supremacy 2 centuries later. In the 1930s, Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act shrunk global trade by 66%, deepening the Great Depression in the US, according to Peterson Institute. 2018 to 2019, Sino-US tariffs cost American consumers $127 billion annually, according to New York Federal Reserve. Modern poison pill clauses are ultimately institutional defenses of waning hegemony. The real impact lies not in containing China, but in forcing global firms to pay regulatory arbitrage costs, a burden destined for US households. Boston Consulting Group projection is full decoupling would add $2,500 per year to average American family expenses. Before answering this question, I must assume US and Western elites are rational enough to grasp the fundamental paradox described earlier. Whether this assumption holds isn't my concern here. Theoretical deductions often demand execution in intellectual vacuums. Time alone can verify. In the material world, humanity's trinity of progress has always been creating tangible objects that can be seen and touched, which derives from the needs, the desires, and execution. Materialist China, inventor of paper, gunpowder, compass, and printing, has been the world's workshop for millennia, save its late 19th to mid-20th century decline. After 4 decades of reform, it has reclaimed this mantle. America is totally a different cup of tea. It is a product of pure idealism. The symbolically named Mayflower carried monotheistic Protestants. Most subsequent immigrants were likewise devout. Calling America an immigrant nation is 70% incomplete. It's fundamentally a religious civilization. In God we trust stamps every banknote and coin. Presidential authors since Washington end with "So help me God." God bless America, ritualized by Eisenhower, concludes every modern president's speech. A constitutionally secular America never escaped religious symbolic domination. Thus, abstractions thrive. From concretized ballots to Wall Street's virtual reality stock market, these birthed history's largest financial empire, while derivatives proliferate dizzyingly. Producing tangible goods is America's necessity, never its aspiration. It lacks Japan's extinct craftsman spirit and China's materialist drive. That is, what you have, I must have. What you lack, I will pioneer. For elites, especially the inner cabal, social wealth's abstraction became the ultimate pursuit, crowned with a fearsome name, power. For this power, they spend profligately, act ruthlessly, and kill indiscriminately. A nexus is required between the material and the spiritual worlds. Otherwise, human beings cannot accomplish the transition. Power cannot be completely monopolized in the material world because tangible and concrete things require time to produce and space to store. As a result, throughout China's dynastic history, emperors ultimately perished in their endless pursuit of possessing or lacking these very material things. When they had too much, the people rebelled and overthrew their rule. When they had too little, they were unable to maintain control over their empire. Thus, how to master the art of balancing possession and non-possession has long preoccupied China's elite class, a challenge they have pondered deeply, even while remaining endlessly fascinated by it. This understanding of the material world has therefore become deeply rooted in Chinese society. Meanwhile, America's proud slogan, "The land of the free and home of the brave," is seen by most Chinese people as a meaningless joke with little reverence to their reality. Don't cite me those Chinese American worshippers. Those who fled or dream of fleeing are statistically negligible. Millennia of agrarian culture flow in Chinese blood. On this, I agree with Vice President Vance calling Chinese peasants and take pride in it. Farmers are Earth's most grounded people. They don't waste energy chasing false idols like gold trinkets or stocks, because they know trinkets and stocks mean nothing when crisis strikes, while a single steam bun can save a living soul. So, what do Americans, or rather American elites, really want from China? In short, capital and an open financial market. To put it bluntly in everyday language, give me your money. Now, American elites are not exactly poor. In fact, they already have so much wealth that their descendants could live comfortably for generations without ever working again. And yet, they still choose to go after China, because the Chinese people are now the second wealthiest group on the planet. And more importantly, their money is more real, more valuable, and more useful in terms of actual exchange. And that, to the American elites, is a problem. Because in peacetime, the Chinese money takes the shape of skyscrapers. In wartime, it becomes fighter jets and artillery. When you are hungry, it's steam buns and dumplings. When you have leisure, it buys you tickets to see the world. This kind of life is what many ordinary Americans dream of, but can only long for, something just out of their reach. With this sense of frustration built up too long among the American public, it might eventually lead to rebellion. But American elites don't want to share their wealth or the power it brings with their own people. So instead, they need the Chinese peasants across the Pacific to behave, to stay obedient, to follow the rules. The Chinese must not show off in front of average Americans who can't even afford to eat without swiping a credit card. So what can the American elites do? It's obviously impossible to demand that the Chinese kneel down and hand over their money. The Chinese have already made it clear China doesn't buy into their BS. And they've acted accordingly, especially during Trump's first round of tariff war. Trying to use force to directly attack and take it from the Chinese would be very risky. Even if they won, the cost might be unbearable. So they come up with another plan, the indirect route. Let the Chinese fully open up their financial markets and essentially hand over their financial sovereignty That way, the American elite can gain control over the material world the Chinese have painstakingly built without firing a single shot. The benefits of this strategy are beyond killing two birds with one stone. It's more like killing several birds with one stone. Their virtual bank accounts get even more zeros, strengthening their power base. A bit of that wealth trickles down to the American public to calm them down and prevent unrest at home. And perhaps most satisfying to the American elites is forcing these hardworking Chinese peasants who only know how to produce things into a position of servitude, whether they like it or not. Believe me, that's what the American elites truly want. But there's nothing new under the sun. The simplest explanation is often the most truthful. And just as simple is the fact that if I, an ordinary person, can see this, surely the Chinese government sees it even more clearly. Do materialists really not understand idealists? After all, both need to eat 3 meals a day. So the upcoming US-China trade talks, or whatever you call them, scheduled for June 10th, are something the Chinese understand perfectly well. If Trump and his team cling stubbornly to unrealistic expectations, the Chinese may make them look very bad indeed. In the world of carbon-based life forms, materialists always have a natural advantage over those idealists. So let's just sit back, grab some popcorn, and watch the show unfold.